Good morning.
A live view of the Cygnus cargo craft on Northrop Grumman's 12th resupply mission as it approaches the International Space Station for a capture and berthing this morning, November 4th. I'm NASA's Leah Cheshire, and we're live here in the Mission Control Room, International Space Station Mission Control Center at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where teams today are monitoring the arrival of Cygnus and everything going on aboard the space station. Lead flight director for the Cygnus mission is Rick LeBrode, and he's accompanied by Allison Bollinger this morning. You can see them there at the bottom of the screen, and to their right is Megan Levins, the Capcom, or the capsule communicator, who is in communication with the astronauts aboard the International Space Station.
That was a good setup. We say this is a very short DPC today, as here in Houston, as well as all of the control centers are standing by should you have any questions or comments for us, but we have nothing for you this morning.
We don't have any questions or comments for the pods or the other centers. However, we do have a request for Houston, and this comes from me. This morning, operationally, we were impacted by Jessica's email or capability to access her email, and this has been a very, very continuous instance. So at this point, I think I would like Houston to roll everybody back to Nomad until we have the new system with the 90-day identification so that everybody can access their email and not be impacted operationally. And let us know when you can do that. Thank you.
We copy all, Luca, and we'll look into it.
As I mentioned, capsule communicator Megan Levins discussing with the crew on board all of the procedures for the day and the upcoming procedures for Cygnus arrival. Cygnus is scheduled to be captured at 3:10 a.m. Central Time. Our visiting vehicle officer this morning is Jerry Yancharis. He's keeping tabs on the Cygnus spacecraft and is communicating its status with Mission Control here. This is the Northrop Grumman Mission Control Center in Dulles, Virginia, where teams are monitoring all the systems aboard Cygnus and are in communication with teams here at NASA Johnson. The mission director this morning for Northrop Grumman is Zach Dwyer. He's monitoring the teams and controllers here in the Cygnus flight control room. Cygnus continues to make its approach toward the International Space Station. It recently crossed the approach ellipsoid. That's the 1 kilometer line around the station, and upon crossing that, joint operations began between Northrop Grumman and NASA. The spacecraft itself is now at the 400-meter point. It has several checks to go through this morning before we see the grapple by the Canadarm2, the next being a hold point at 250 meters while teams on the ground run checks on the vehicle and the space station to make sure both are ready for the upcoming procedures. Cygnus will cross the keep out sphere, just an invisible line around the space station at 200 meters. Eventually it will reach another 30-meter hold point. Teams will run a check on Cygnus systems, working with the teams at Northrop Grumman's Mission Control Center. And once everything is determined to be on track, Northrop Grumman will give their go, and Cygnus will depart the 30-meter hold point. After departing the 30-meter hold point, Cygnus will move to about 10 to 12 meters away from the station. That's the capture point, at which the Canadarm 2 will be used to reach out and grapple the spacecraft. After capture this morning, the controls will be turned over to teams on the ground, the robotics controller, and he will use the Canadarm2 to reposition the Cygnus craft, bring it up to the station, and berth it with the station's Unity module. Currently aboard the International Space Station are astronaut Andrew Morgan, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Skvortsov, European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano, Roscosmos Oleg Skripochka, and NASA's Jessica Meir and Christina Koch. This is the first spaceflight for Andrew Morgan, Jessica Meir, and Christina Koch. And this morning, Koch and Meir both have special roles in the arrival of Cygnus. Jessica Meir will be the prime robotics controller on the space station, and she'll take her place in the cupola, which is the bay window area at the workstation, and use the Canadarm2 to reach out and grapple the spacecraft before handing controls back over to teams on the ground for the berthing of the vehicle to the Unity module. She is backed up this morning by NASA's Christina Koch, and NASA astronaut Drew Morgan will monitor Cygnus systems during final stage of the rendezvous. This is a live view from the International Space Station, which is currently flying 267 statute miles south of Australia in the Indian Ocean. It's taken Cygnus about 2 days to get to the point where you see it now. It launched on time at 8:59 a.m. Central Time, 9:59 a.m. Eastern on November 2nd, 2019, carrying over 4 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. You can see Cygnus here lifting off on the Antares rocket from the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport's Pad 0A at NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Wallops Island, Virginia. It was a sunny morning and Cygnus made it off the launch pad on the first launch attempt. And after the first stage burning for approximately 3 minutes and 18 seconds, we switched over to the Stage 2 motor, eventually Cygnus making an 8-minute and 49-second ascent into orbit. Solar arrays unfurled and began collecting power, which takes about 30 minutes to do, about 2.5 hours after launch on November 2nd. Cygnus launch occurred just 1 day after the departure of JAXA's HTV cargo vehicle, which burned up upon re-entry to Earth's atmosphere as planned on Saturday night. Cygnus also launched 19 years to the day that the 3-member Expedition 1 crew of William Shepard, Yuri Gidzenko, and Sergei Krikalev arrived at the International Space Station, beginning 19 years of continuous human presence in outer space. Teams on the ground are expecting Cygnus to arrive at the 250-meter hold point in about 4 minutes and 30 seconds now. You can see the colors changing in the clouds below Cygnus, and that's because we are approaching what is called the Terminator line. That's the difference between day and night on Earth. The space station making about 16 orbits of Earth every day. Northrop Grumman's Cygnus catching the glint of the sun as it enters an orbital nighttime over New Zealand. About 2 minutes away from the 250-meter hold point on its way up to the International Space Station this morning. Things still moving smoothly this morning. It's about an hour until Cygnus reaches that capture point of 10 to 15 meters from the International Space Station, so we're still looking for an on-time capture at about 3:10 a.m. Central Time. All Cygnus vehicles are named after those who have made significant contributions to spaceflight but have since passed away, and this vehicle is named after the late Apollo and Skylab astronaut who died on May 26, 2018 at the age of 86. That is Alan Bean for the Northrop Grumman 12 mission, and it launched 50 years to the month after Bean, Pete Conrad, and Dick Gordon flew to the moon on the Apollo 12 mission, in which Alan Bean became the fourth human to walk on the lunar surface. He was the lunar module pilot aboard Intrepid with Mission Commander Conrad when they landed on the moon at the Ocean of Storms on November 19, 1969. 4 years later, Bean commanded the second crewed Skylab mission, Skylab 3, which launched on July 28, 1973. Bean, Owen Garriott, and Jack Luzma spent 59 days in space aboard America's first space station. Alan Bean's name flies again today on the Cygnus Northrop Grumman 12 mission on its way to the International Space Station. Cygnus has now reached the 250-meter hold point, where it will stay for some checks here on the ground and eventually proceed through the 200-meter keep-out sphere before continuing its ascent to the International Space Station.
Station Houston on space to ground 2 for Cygnus. Confirm Cygnus 250-meter hold per step 2 in 1.102.
Copy and work.
As Cygnus continues to hold at the 250-meter hold point, teams here will begin a go, no-go poll shortly to confirm that Cygnus is ready to proceed its ascent to the International Space Station, which is currently flying 263 statute miles over the South Pacific Ocean.
Station on 2 in step 2 of 1.102. The Cygnus command panel LED status is as expected. Pi range 251.98 and block Bravo. First off, in the P1 lower outboard, the light is in the corridor. The outline matches the vehicle size. The light is offset from the circle by a half a width starboard and slightly forward. The circle is offset from the center by 1 width starboard. In S1 lower outboard, everything is the same except the light is offset by the circle by 4 to 5 vehicle widths port and 1 vehicle width length forward.
Copy, all nominal.
NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Christina Koch are at the cupola workstation, the robotics workstation inside the cupola, which you can see here, where they are monitoring the approach of Cygnus. And they'll also have a great view outside the windows as Cygnus approaches. They will use the Canadarm2 to reach out and grapple the spacecraft once it reaches the 10 to 12 meter point away from the space station. Currently, Cygnus continues to hold at the 250 meter hold point while teams perform checks on the ground.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2. Cygnus and ISS are configured for approach inside the keep-out sphere. Expect approach to resume shortly and stand by for the Cygnus PCS command checkout.
Copies.
As you heard Capcom Megan Levins relaying to the crew aboard the space station, Cygnus has now been approved to depart the 250-meter hold point and approach the 200-meter keep-out sphere, that invisible line around the space station.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Cygnus has resumed approach. Go for Cygnus PCS command checkout. Hold arm per step 3 in 1.102.
Copy. Go for step 3 in 1.102.
Things continue to proceed smoothly this morning for Cygnus, which is carrying over 8,200 pounds to the International Space Station, the heaviest payload for a Cygnus resupply craft yet.
Hold is armed.
Copy. We see a good hold arm. Go for Cygnus PCS command checkout. Disarm per step 4 in 1.102.
Copy.
Today aboard Cygnus, that over 4-ton payload, including over 1,761 pounds of crew supplies, utilization being science experiments and associated hardware, reaching over 4,200 pounds. Over 203 pounds of spacewalk equipment, including the tools necessary for the alpha magnetic spectrometer spacewalks coming up later this month. Also 1,561 pounds of vehicle and system equipment, and another 31 pounds of computer resources.
Station Houston on 2. Cygnus is inside the 250-meter keep-out sphere. 200-meter keep-out sphere. Crew now has authority to issue an abort if no comm with MCCH, and the light is outside the corridor.
Copy.
And that call coming from the capsule communicator to the crew, confirming that Cygnus has crossed the 200-meter keep-out sphere around the space station. The station is currently flying 260 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. We'd take a block Bravo when you're ready.
Station copies, in work.
Cygnus is now under 150 meters away from the space station. This is the view of the robotics workstation inside the cupola module, where NASA astronaut Jessica Meir will command the Canadarm2 to capture the vehicle once it's reached that 10 to 12 meter point away from the International Space Station. She's backed up by NASA's Christina Koch and joined by NASA astronaut Drew Morgan, who will monitor Cygnus systems upon final approach. After capture this morning, the space station Canadarm2 commands will be turned over to robotics controllers here on the ground. They'll then use the Canadarm2 to reposition Cygnus, bring it up toward the space station, and berth it to the station's Unity module, where it will remain attached until January 13th next year.
Station on 2 for block Bravo. In the P1 lower outboard, no changes. S1 lower outboard converging to 3 to for the light offset from the circle, converging to 3 to 4 widths port and half a length forward.
Copy all. Nominal.
Cygnus still in an orbital nighttime, but now inside the 100-meter range from the International Space Station coming up on the east of Mexico. Cygnus is now inside 80 meters from the International Space Station, which is flying 262 statute miles over Arizona. If you're on Twitter this morning, we will be taking your questions with the hashtag AskNASA. And the first this morning asking if we can see the space station from Earth without a telescope. The space station is the third brightest object in the night sky, which makes it easy to see without a telescope, and you can actually find out how to do so by visiting www.spotthestation.gov to learn more. You can type in your location and receive updates about when the space station is going to fly over your area and when to look up. Cygnus is 65 meters away from the space station, and as Northrop Grumman 12 Cygnus approaches the Unity module for capture and berthing later this morning, it is not the only Cygnus spacecraft in orbit. This is the first time two Cygnus spacecraft, the other being from Northrop Grumman's 11 mission, is still orbiting Earth for engineering testing and will return to Earth's atmosphere on December 11th. As Cygnus continues to approach the 30-meter hold point, its next step, we have another Ask NASA question coming from Junior Craft, wondering if this Cygnus will also do a long-duration extended mission. Cygnus is scheduled to depart the International Space Station on January 13th, 2020, but it will not return to Earth for another couple of weeks. It will stay in space to complete some additional objectives before burning up upon re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. We are in a short satellite handover period. These are tracked by the teams here on the ground. And we will regain communications with the space station very shortly. Cygnus is approaching the 30-meter hold point. Teams will run a check on Cygnus systems here in Mission Control Houston and at Northrop Grumman's Mission Control Center in Dulles, Virginia.
Station Houston on space to ground 2. Confirm 30-meter hold and set up for capture per step 6 in 1.102.
In work.
As you heard, Capcom Megan Levins talking with the crew aboard the space station who are monitoring Cygnus, which you can see here in the robotics workstation, where they will use the Canadarm2 to reach out and grapple the vehicle. This 30-meter hold is the final hold point before Cygnus proceeds to the 10 to 12-meter capture point, at which point the Canadarm2 can be used to capture Cygnus. In this view of the robotics workstation inside the cupola module, you can see NASA astronauts Christina, Koch, and Jessica Meir are orienting their cameras to get a good view of the Canadarm2 now at the bottom of the screen. When it reaches the 10 to 12 meter hold point, Cygnus will be ready for capture. Cygnus still at the 30-meter hold point as the International Space Station is flying 262 statute miles over the North Atlantic Ocean. You can see the space station has now crossed over into an orbital daytime, flying over 17,000 miles per hour.
Houston Station on 2. Crew is ready for Cygnus approach to the capture point.
Houston copies. Station Houston on Space Ground 2 for Cygnus. Cygnus is ready to proceed to the capture point. Expect approach to resume shortly.
Copies.
Now flying 260 statute miles over Morocco, the International Space Station looking down on Cygnus, which has departed the 30-meter hold point. We'll see Cygnus move much more slowly than it was earlier today, up to the capture point of about 10 to 12 meters away from the International Space Station. This ascension from the hold point at 30 meters to the capture point of about 10 to 12 meters takes around 15 minutes. These are very deliberate movements as required when near the space station to ensure a safe approach.
Within 30 meters per step 7 in 1.102. You are primed to issue retreat if pry range less than 6 meters.
Station copies.
Cygnus and the International Space Station flying over Algeria, and Cygnus is scheduled to reach the capture point of 10 to 12 meters away from the space station in about 6 minutes and 45 seconds.
Houston Station on 2 with a block Bravo. In both camera views, P1 lower outboard and S1 lower outboard, the light is in the corridor. The outline matches the vehicle size. The light is not offset from the circle, and the circle is not offset from the center.
Copy, all nominal.
Cygnus now 20 meters away from the space station and just a few minutes away from reaching the capture point. Once Cygnus reaches that 10 to 12 meters away from the space station, Jessica, Meir, and Christina Koch aboard the International Space Station in the cupola module will use the Canadarm2 to reach out and grapple the spacecraft. We'll see initial contact, and then capture will be confirmed once a series of locks and latches have secured it to the latching end effector on the Canadarm2. This view down the latching end effector of the Canadarm2, you can see Cygnus approaching the space station very slowly and deliberately. It will be arriving at that capture point very shortly.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Confirm capture point hold per step 8 in 1.102.
Cygnus is now holding about 12 meters away from the International Space Station at its capture point.
Houston Station, capture conditions confirmed. Crew is ready for Cygnus capture.
Another short handover of the tracking data and relay satellite systems.
Houston Station on 2, capture conditions confirmed. Crew is ready for Cygnus capture.
Copy all. Stand by for capture. And just a reminder, the no exercise constraint is for this from this period till after capture.
Copy, and we confirm we are meeting that constraint.
Thanks for the check.
Teams here on the ground are making their final poll for no-go or go for capture.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Your go for Cygnus capture sequence, step 4 in 1.110, Cygnus capture. Begin monitoring the backaway cue card.
Station copies.
The crew has received the green light to go ahead and use the Canadarm2 to reach out and capture Cygnus. We'll start to see it move very slowly toward the spacecraft. It will make initial contact, and then capture will be confirmed once a series of snares have closed. The robotic arm is now in motion. Arm 4 meters away from Cygnus. From this view, you can see the arm slowly approaching that grapple fixture on Cygnus. Canadarm 2 now 2.5 meters away from the vehicle. Arm now 1.5 meter. Arm is now 1 meter. The arm is now over the pin, alignment looking good. And the snares have closed, and Cygnus capture has been confirmed as it was flying over Madagascar at 3:10 a.m. Central Time, 4:10 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. And the final latches that attach the Canadarm2 to Cygnus have been completed.
Station on 2, Cygnus capture complete. Go for Cygnus post-capture reconfiguration.
Copy all. Good capture.
Houston, this Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft is named after Apollo 12 astronaut Alan Bean, the fourth human to walk on the moon. As in just 10 days, it will be the 50th anniversary of the launch of Bean's mission. This vehicle honors the legacy of the past, advances our efforts in the present with its delivery of critical International Space Station cargo, and also serves as a harbinger of the future with NASA's current plans to return to the moon with the Artemis missions. Congratulations to the dedicated personnel that brought another successful signal resupply mission to fruition.
Copy and welcome to the ISS.
And some words from NASA astronaut Jessica Meir welcoming Northrop Grumman's 12th resupply mission to the International Space Station, the SS Alan Bean. Now that capture is complete, the controls of the arm are handed over to Houston to reposition the vehicle and prepare it for berthing to the Unity module. This morning, as the space station was flying over Madagascar, Cygnus, as you see here at the end of the Canadarm2, was captured at 3:10 a.m. Central Time, 4:10 a.m. Eastern Time by NASA astronaut Jessica Meir alongside NASA astronaut Christina Koch. After grapple of the spacecraft, control of the robotic arm has been handed over to teams on the ground. They will use the Canadarm2 to reposition Cygnus and bring it up toward the station's Unity module. We're going to take a break as some of that occurs and come back to continue our coverage of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus arrival to the space station. We'll be live at 5 a.m. Central Time. Once we return, we'll continue answering social media questions, so keep sending those in with the hashtag AskNASA. In the meantime, that concludes our coverage of the capture of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus, completed successfully at 3:10 a.m. Central Time, 4:10 a.m. Eastern this morning. Join us live again for berthing coverage at 5 a.m. Central. Signing off for now, this is Mission Control Houston.